The scream came first, sharp and sudden, cutting through the quiet evening air of Millhaven Street. Elena froze mid-step, her grocery bag pressing against her hip, her heart slamming against her ribs. She turned toward the sound and saw nothing but shadows stretching across the pavement and a group of people hurrying away, refusing to look back. She should have walked on. Everyone else did. But something pulled her feet toward the narrow alley beside the old shoe repair shop, where the streetlight flickered weakly, barely holding back the darkness. There, slumped against the cold brick wall, was a man. His clothes were torn, his face bruised, and his breathing came in short, ragged pulls. He looked like he had been thrown away by the world itself. Elena's hands trembled as she knelt beside him, careful not to touch his wounds. "Sir, can you hear me?" Her voice was soft, but urgent. The man's eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, she felt something strange pass through her, like meeting the gaze of someone far more powerful than his ragged appearance suggested. His eyes were a deep amber color, sharp and alert despite his pain, as if he were assessing every possible danger around him even now. "Water," he managed to whisper, his voice hoarse and broken. Elena did not think twice. She pulled a small bottle from her grocery bag and helped him drink, tilting it carefully so he wouldn't choke. The man drank slowly, gratefully, his shaking hand wrapping around hers for just a moment longer than necessary. When he finished, he tried to speak again, but the words came out as a pained groan instead, and his head dropped back against the wall. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Elena said, glancing around the empty street. No one was coming to help. No one ever did in this part of town. She had lived on Millhaven Street long enough to know that people here had learned to look away from suffering, because helping often invited trouble upon yourself. But Elena had never learned that lesson. Not really. Her mother used to say she had too much heart for a world this cold, and maybe that was true. She looked at the stranger's face again, at the dried blood near his temple, the torn sleeve revealing a nasty gash on his arm, and she made her decision before her fear could talk her out of it. "Can you stand?" she asked. The man tried, pushing himself up with visible effort, his jaw tightening against what must have been searing pain. He was taller than she expected once upright, his shoulders broad, despite the gauntness of hunger or exhaustion carved into his face. He swayed, and Elena quickly moved to support him, surprised by how solid he felt beneath the torn clothing, like someone whose body had once been trained for strength, not weakened by years of neglect. "Thank you," he rasped, leaning heavily against her. "Don't thank me yet. My apartment is 3 blocks from here. Can you walk that far?" He nodded, though his face betrayed doubt. Slowly, painfully, they made their way down the street, Elena bearing much of his weight against her smaller frame. A few people passed them, glancing with curiosity or disdain, but no one stopped to ask if they needed help. Elena kept her eyes forward, focused only on reaching her small apartment building at the corner of Willow Lane. By the time they reached her door, both of them were breathing hard. She fumbled with her keys, her arm still wrapped around the stranger's waist to keep him upright. Finally, the door creaked open, and she guided him inside, easing him down onto the worn couch that took up most of her tiny living room. "I don't have much," she said, almost apologetically, "but I can clean your wounds and get you something to eat." The man looked around the modest apartment, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the single lamp casting warm light across the room, the small kitchen barely big enough for one person to move comfortably. Despite everything, despite his pain, there was something in his expression that looked almost like wonder, as though this humble space held more comfort than anywhere he had been in a very long time. "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly, his amber eyes studying her face. Elena paused, considering the question, as she retrieved a first aid kit from beneath her sink. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "Isn't that reason enough?" He said nothing, but something shifted behind his eyes, like a wall crumbling just slightly. Elena knelt before him and began to clean the gash on his arm, working with gentle, practiced hands. She had patched up enough scrapes and cuts over the years, from her younger cousins to the bakery's clumsy apprentices, that the motion came naturally to her. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to keep him talking, keep him focused on something other than the pain. He hesitated, just long enough for her to notice. "Rowan," he finally said. "Just Rowan?" "Just Rowan," he confirmed, and something in his tone told her not to press further, at least not tonight. I'm Elena, she said, offering a small smile as she wrapped a clean bandage around his arm. Elena Marsh. I work at the bakery on 2nd Street. Have you eaten anything today? Rowan shook his head, and Elena felt a pang of guilt for not asking sooner. She rose and moved to the kitchen, pulling out what little she had, some bread, a bit of cheese, and the soup she had planned to have for her own dinner. She warmed it quickly and brought it to him, along with a fork and spoon. He ate slowly at first, almost cautiously, as though unused to the simple act of being fed without expectation of something in return. Elena sat across from him in the old armchair, watching quietly, giving him space to eat without the pressure of conversation. This is good, he said after a while, and there was something raw and genuine in his voice, as if he meant more than just the taste of the soup. It's nothing special, Elena replied. Just something warm. That's more than I've had in longer than I can remember, Rowan admitted. Elena studied him as he continued eating, noticing details she had missed in the panic of the street. His posture, even weakened by injury, carried a certain discipline, a straightness to his spine that spoke of training or habit rather than mere coincidence. His hands, though calloused, did not have the rough, permanent grime of someone who had lived on the street for years, and his eyes, sharp and watchful even now, seemed to catalogue every corner of the room, every possible exit, every shadow that moved. You're not from around here, are you? She asked. Rowan looked up, meeting her gaze directly. No, he admitted, I'm not. Where are you from? He paused, setting down the spoon carefully. Somewhere far from here, a place I can't easily explain. Elena wanted to press further, curiosity burning inside her, but something in his expression, a flicker of exhaustion mixed with something like grief, told her this was not the moment. Instead, she simply nodded, and let the silence settle comfortably between them. You can stay here tonight, she said after a while. I don't have much space, but the couch is comfortable enough, and it's warmer than wherever you were before. Rowan's expression softened, gratitude replacing the guarded wariness that had colored his features since she found him. I don't know how to repay this kindness, he said quietly. You don't have to repay anything, Elena replied. Just rest, heal, that's enough. She retrieved a spare blanket and pillow from her small closet, arranging them on the couch, while Rowan watched with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between disbelief and quiet awe. When everything was ready, she stepped back, suddenly aware of how strange this entire evening had been, how unlike her ordinary, predictable life this moment felt. Good night, Rowan, she said, moving toward her bedroom door. Elena, he called softly, and she turned back. Thank you. Truly. She smiled, a small, genuine expression that seemed to catch him off guard. You're welcome. Sleep well. As she closed her bedroom door and prepared for bed herself, Elena couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled over her since finding the man in the alley. There was something about him, something she couldn't name, that suggested he was far more than a simple beggar who had fallen on hard times. The way he carried himself, the sharpness in his gaze, the strange authority that seemed to linger beneath his exhaustion, all of it pointed toward a man with a history far more complicated than his torn clothing suggested. But exhaustion soon claimed her thoughts, and Elena drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the man resting on her couch was, at this very moment, being searched for by an entire kingdom, hidden from ordinary human sight, a kingdom whose leader had vanished 3 weeks ago, without a single trace, leaving behind chaos, fear, and whispers of betrayal among those who had once sworn absolute loyalty to him. In the darkness of her small living room, Rowan lay awake long after Elena had gone to bed, staring at the cracked ceiling above him, his mind replaying the ambush that had left him broken and stranded in a city he barely knew. He thought of the faces of those he had trusted, faces that had turned against him in an instant, and the pain of that betrayal cut deeper than any of his physical wounds. He thought, too, of the woman who had found him, a stranger with no reason to help him, who had given him water and warmth and a place to rest without asking a single thing in return. In his world, kindness like that was rare, often calculated, always expecting something eventually. But Elena's kindness felt different, uncomplicated, genuine, in a way that unsettled him more than any threat he had faced in recent weeks. He knew he could not stay long. His enemies would be searching for him, and if they found him here, they would bring danger to this small apartment, and to the woman who had shown him such unexpected grace. But for tonight, exhausted and wounded, he allowed himself the rare comfort of safety, however temporary it might be. As the first hours of night stretched into the deeper quiet before dawn, Rowan finally allowed his eyes to close, grateful beyond words for the small mercy of a warm blanket, a full stomach, and the strange, unearned kindness of a woman named Elena Marsh, who had no idea that the man sleeping on her couch held a title and a power that could reshape the fate of an entire hidden world, a world she knew absolutely nothing about, and one that was about to come crashing into her simple, quiet life, whether she was ready for it or not. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through Elena's thin curtains, and she woke earlier than usual, her mind immediately going to the stranger sleeping in her living room. She dressed quickly and stepped out of her bedroom, half expecting to find the couch empty, the man having slipped away in the night, as so many desperate souls tended to do. Instead, she found Rowan sitting upright, alert, his eyes fixed on the window as though he had been awake for hours, watching the street below with careful attention. He turned when he heard her approach, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, relief perhaps, or surprise, that she had not simply abandoned her generosity overnight. "Good morning," Elena said, moving toward the kitchen to prepare something simple for breakfast. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Rowan admitted, though the stiffness in his movements suggested otherwise. "Thanks to you." "I need to get to the bakery soon," she said, glancing at the clock on her wall. "But you should rest here today. There's food in the kitchen, and I'll bring back more when my shift ends." Rowan hesitated, clearly torn between the desire to stay somewhere safe and the instinct that told him he was placing her in danger simply by remaining under her roof. "Elena," he said carefully, "I don't want to bring trouble to your home." "What kind of trouble would you bring?" she asked, only half joking as she packed a small lunch for herself. He didn't answer immediately, and Elena, sensing his hesitation, decided not to push. "Just rest," she said gently. "Whatever trouble you think you might bring, it can wait until you're strong enough to face it. For now, you need to heal." Something in her simple insistence seemed to settle him, and he nodded, accepting her offer with quiet gratitude. Elena gathered her things and moved toward the door, pausing just before she left. "There's a spare key on the counter," she said, "in case you need to step out for fresh air. Just be careful." "I will," he promised. As Elena walked to work that morning, her thoughts kept drifting back to the man she had left in her apartment, this stranger named Rowan whose eyes held secrets she couldn't begin to guess. She told herself she was simply being a decent person, offering help to someone who needed it, nothing more complicated than that. But some part of her, some quiet intuition she couldn't quite silence, whispered that her life had just shifted onto a path she never could have anticipated, one that would lead her far from the safe, predictable routine she had built for herself on Millhaven Street. She had no way of knowing, as she pushed open the door to Oliver's bakery and tied on her apron for another ordinary day of kneading dough and serving customers, that somewhere across the city, and indeed across realms hidden from human eyes entirely, powerful forces were closing in on the very man she had welcomed into her humble home, forces that would soon test the boundaries of her simple, generous heart in ways she never could have imagined. 3 days passed, and Rowan remained in Elena's small apartment, his wounds slowly closing, his strength returning faster than any ordinary man's should. Elena noticed this, of course, how the deep gash on his arm had already begun knitting together into a thin pink line rather than an angry wound, how the bruises across his face had faded to faint shadows within a time frame that seemed almost impossible. She said nothing about it, though the observation lodged itself quietly in the back of her mind, a small puzzle piece she couldn't yet fit into any larger picture. On the 4th morning, she found him standing at her window again, watching the street below with the same careful, unblinking attention she had noticed before. He seemed to do this often, as though some part of him could never fully relax, always alert for danger that might come from any direction. "You look better today," Elena said, setting a plate of eggs and toast on the small table. Rowan turned from the window, offering her a faint smile. "I feel better. Because of you." "Because of rest and food," Elena corrected gently, though she couldn't help the small warmth that spread through her chest at his words. "Come eat before it gets cold." He joined her at the table, and they ate together, in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that no longer felt awkward between two near strangers, but had softened into something more familiar. Elena found herself studying him again, the way he held his fork with careful precision, the way his eyes flicked toward the door every few minutes, as though expecting trouble to arrive uninvited. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally, setting down her own fork. "I can't promise I'll answer." "Fair enough." She considered her words carefully. "What happened to you? Before I found you in that alley? Who did that to you?" Rowan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Elena thought he might refuse to answer entirely. But then he sighed, setting down his own fork, his expression turning distant, as though he were looking through the walls of her apartment toward some place far away. "There are people," he said slowly, "who I once trusted completely. People who owed everything they had to my family, to the position my family held. And when the moment came where trust mattered most, they chose betrayal instead." "Betrayal for what?" "Power," Rowan said simply. "It usually comes down to power, in the end." Elena wanted to ask more, to press for names and details, for some clearer understanding of what exactly had happened, to leave a man like Rowan bleeding in an alley on Millhaven Street. But something in his expression told her this was as far as he was willing to go, at least for today, and she respected that boundary, even as her curiosity burned brighter than ever. "Well," she said instead, offering a gentle smile, "whoever they are, they don't sound like people worth grieving over. You're safe here, for now." "For now," Rowan repeated, and something in his tone carried a weight of uncertainty that made Elena's chest tighten with unexpected concern. That evening, when Elena returned from her shift at the bakery, she found the apartment unusually quiet. Her heart skipped, fearing Rowan might have left, that his caution about bringing danger to her home had finally outweighed his need for safety. But she found him in the kitchen, of all places, attempting to prepare something on her small stove, an expression of intense concentration on his face that struck her as almost comical given the circumstances. "What are you doing?" she asked, amusement coloring her voice. Rowan glanced up, looking almost sheepish. "I wanted to do something for you, since you've done so much for me. I'm afraid I'm not very skilled at this." Elena stepped closer, peering into the pot on the stove, where something that vaguely resembled soup bubbled unevenly, clearly missing several key ingredients and proper seasoning. She laughed, a genuine, warm sound that seemed to catch Rowan off guard. "It's the thought that counts," she said, moving to help him, adding what was missing, adjusting the heat, guiding his hands with gentle patience. "Here, like this." Rowan watched her closely, his expression softening into something Elena hadn't seen from him before, an openness, almost vulnerability, that felt different from the guarded watchfulness he usually carried. "You're patient," he observed. "I've had practice," Elena said, thinking of her years working in the bakery, teaching new apprentices, who often made far bigger messes than a poorly seasoned soup. "Besides, it's nice to have help around here, even clumsy help." "I'll take that as a compliment," Rowan said, and for the first time since she had found him, Elena heard something close to genuine laughter in his voice. They finished preparing the meal together, and as they ate, conversation flowed more easily than it had before. Rowan asked about her life, about the bakery, about her family, and Elena found herself sharing more than she typically did, with people she had known for years, let alone days. She told him about her parents, who had passed years ago, about how she had built her small, quiet life from nothing, working hard to maintain her independence, even when loneliness crept in during the long winter evenings. "You've done well for yourself," Rowan said, admiration clear in his voice. "Building something from nothing takes a particular kind of strength." "It's not much," Elena said, though his words warmed something inside her chest. "Just a small apartment and a bakery job." "It's more than most people manage," Rowan replied. "Trust me." Elena wanted to ask what he meant by that, what experience gave him the authority to make such a statement, but she held her tongue, sensing that pushing too hard, too fast, might close the door he had only just begun to open. Over the following days, their routine settled into something comfortable, almost domestic. Elena worked her shifts at the bakery while Rowan remained mostly hidden inside the apartment, venturing out only briefly for fresh air, when the street outside seemed quiet enough to risk it. In the evenings, they shared meals together, talked about small, ordinary things, and slowly, carefully, built something that felt increasingly like genuine friendship between them. But even as their bond deepened, Elena continued to notice small inconsistencies that didn't add up. Once, she watched him catch a falling plate with reflexes so fast she barely registered the movement before it happened. Another time, she woke in the middle of the night to find him standing motionless by the window, having heard something outside that Elena herself couldn't detect at all, his posture tense and alert, like a soldier awaiting an ambush. She began to wonder, quietly, who exactly this man was, and what kind of life had shaped him into someone capable of such heightened awareness, such unusual strength, such careful, practiced discipline even in the smallest of movements. But every time she considered asking directly, something held her back, a sense that the truth, whatever it was, might change everything between them, might introduce complications into a friendship that had become unexpectedly important to her in such a short amount of time. One evening, nearly a week after she had found him, Elena returned from work to find Rowan sitting quietly at her small table, an unusual seriousness in his expression that immediately put her on alert. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her bag. "I think it's time I told you the truth about who I am," Rowan said, his voice steady but heavy with some unspoken weight. "You deserve to know, after everything you've done for me." Elena's heart raced, curiosity and apprehension mixing together as she took a seat across from him, bracing herself for whatever revelation was about to reshape everything she thought she understood about the mysterious man who had become such an unexpected part of her life. But before Rowan could speak another word, a sharp knock echoed against the apartment door. 3 quick raps that seemed to carry an urgency neither of them could ignore. Rowan's entire demeanor shifted instantly, his relaxed posture snapping into something rigid and alert, his eyes narrowing toward the door, with an expression Elena had never seen on him before, something that looked remarkably like readiness for danger. "Elena," he said quietly, his voice low and urgent, "stay behind me." Confused and increasingly frightened, Elena rose from her chair, watching as Rowan moved toward the door with a controlled, deliberate grace that seemed entirely at odds with the exhausted, wounded man she had carried home from that alley just a week ago. Whatever truth he had been about to share with her would have to wait, because whoever stood on the other side of that door had arrived with a purpose that neither of them could yet predict, and Elena felt, for the first time since this strange journey began, a genuine flicker of fear about exactly what kind of world she had unknowingly stepped into. Rowan reached the door and paused, his hand hovering just above the handle, his head tilting slightly, as though listening for something beyond what ordinary hearing could catch. Elena stood frozen behind him, her pulse pounding in her ears, wondering what threat could possibly warrant such intense caution from a man who had seemed, only moments earlier, ready to share the deepest secret of his identity. "Who is it?" Rowan called out, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority Elena had never heard from him before. "It's Grace, from next door," came the reply, muffled through the wood. "Elena, is everything all right in there? I heard voices and wanted to check." The tension drained from Rowan's shoulders almost immediately, though he did not fully relax until Elena stepped forward and opened the door herself, revealing her elderly neighbor standing in the hallway with a look of mild concern on her wrinkled face. "Everything's fine, Grace," Elena said, forcing a reassuring smile despite her racing heart. "Just a friend visiting. I'm sorry if we were too loud." Grace's eyes flicked curiously toward Rowan, who had stepped back to give the appearance of casual ease, though Elena could see the residual tension still coiled beneath his relaxed posture. "Well, all right then," Grace said slowly, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to pry further. "Just wanted to make sure you were safe, dear. You know how this neighborhood can be." "Thank you for checking," Elena said, gently closing the door once Grace had shuffled back toward her own apartment. She turned to face Rowan, her heart still racing from the sudden scare. "That was just my neighbor. Nothing to worry about." But Rowan's expression remained troubled, his eyes distant, as though the false alarm had reminded him of a very real danger lurking somewhere beyond Elena's small apartment walls. "I should have known," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "I need to be more careful. I can't keep putting you at risk like this." "Rowan," Elena said firmly, stepping closer to him. "You were about to tell me something important, before that knock interrupted us. Please, don't stop now." He looked at her for a long moment, searching her face, as though weighing the consequences of the truth he had almost revealed. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. a gesture of exhaustion that seemed to carry far more weight than simple physical tiredness. "Not tonight," he said quietly. "I need to think carefully about how to explain this, and after what just happened, I think it's better if I wait until I'm certain we're truly safe. Please understand. It's not that I don't trust you. It's that once you know, there's no going back to how things were before." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she deserved the truth immediately, but something in his tone convinced her that pushing further tonight would accomplish nothing except causing him more distress. Instead, she nodded, accepting his hesitation with the same patience she had shown him since the very first night she found him bleeding in that alley. "All right," she said softly. "Whenever you're ready." Over the following days, life settled back into its careful rhythm, though something had shifted between them since that interrupted confession. Elena found herself watching Rowan more closely now, noticing details she might have previously overlooked, the way he positioned himself near windows and doors, as though calculating escape routes without conscious thought, the way certain sounds from the street outside made him tense in ways ordinary noises shouldn't. One afternoon, while Elena was at work, Rowan ventured briefly outside for fresh air, wandering a few streets from her apartment despite the risk. He found himself standing near a small park, watching children play under the watchful eyes of their parents, an ordinary scene that struck him with unexpected emotion. In his own world, childhood had always come bound with expectation and duty, training and responsibility, layered over every innocent moment. Watching these human children laugh freely, without the weight of legacy pressing down upon their small shoulders, filled him with a longing he hadn't expected to feel. As he stood there, lost in thought, he failed to notice a man watching him from across the street, someone whose posture carried the same careful discipline Rowan himself possessed, someone whose eyes tracked his every movement with predatory patience. It wasn't until the man began crossing the street directly toward him that Rowan's instincts finally snapped back into full alertness, and he turned to walk swiftly in the opposite direction, cutting through side streets and alleys with practiced efficiency until he was certain he had lost whoever had been watching him. By the time he returned to Elena's apartment, his heart still pounded from the encounter, though he said nothing about it when she arrived home later that evening. He told himself it was simply caution, that he couldn't be certain the man had truly been searching for him, that perhaps his own paranoia had gotten the better of him after weeks of hiding. But deep down, he knew the truth. His enemies were closing in, and every day he remained in Elena's apartment increased the danger she faced simply by association. "You seem distracted tonight," Elena observed over dinner, noticing how Rowan's eyes kept flicking toward the window, how his responses came a beat slower than usual, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Just tired," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Elena didn't believe him, but she chose not to press, sensing that whatever weighed on his mind was connected to the truth he had promised to share eventually. Instead, she changed the subject, telling him about her day at the bakery, about a particularly difficult customer who had complained about the size of his bread loaf despite it being exactly the standard portion, about Oliver's terrible jokes that somehow still made her laugh every single time. Rowan listened intently, grateful for the distraction, grateful for the normalcy of her stories after the tension of his afternoon encounter. There was something profoundly healing about Elena's presence, about the simple, uncomplicated warmth she brought into every conversation, every shared meal, every quiet evening they spent together in her small apartment. "You have a gift," he told her suddenly, interrupting her story about a batch of burnt cinnamon rolls. "What gift?" Elena asked, confused by the sudden shift in conversation. "You make ordinary moments feel meaningful," Rowan said, his voice soft with genuine admiration. "I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who calculate every word, every gesture, always searching for advantage in every interaction. You don't do that. You just exist, honestly and openly, and somehow that makes everything around you feel lighter." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, unused to such direct, heartfelt praise. "That's a lot of meaning to find in burnt cinnamon rolls," she said, trying to deflect the intensity of the moment with humor. But Rowan didn't laugh, didn't look away. "I mean it, Elena. Whatever happens next, whatever you eventually learn about who I am and where I come from, please know that these past weeks with you have meant more to me than you could possibly understand." Something in his tone sent a chill through Elena, a premonition that whatever secret he carried was about to surface sooner rather than later, and that when it did, Everything about their careful, comfortable routine would change irrevocably. She wanted to ask him directly, to demand the truth right then and there, but the vulnerability in his expression stopped her, and instead, she simply reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. "Whatever it is," she said quietly, "I don't think it will change how I see you. You've shown me who you are through your actions these past weeks, not through titles or secrets." Rowan's eyes softened, gratitude, and something deeper flickering behind his amber gaze. "I hope you're right," he murmured, "because the truth is more complicated than you might imagine, and once it's out, we won't be able to pretend this is simply an ordinary friendship anymore." Elena held his gaze, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and quiet fear, sensing that the walls protecting her simple, predictable life were beginning to crumble, piece by piece, and that whatever waited on the other side would test everything she thought she understood about kindness, courage, and the strange, unexpected connections that could form between two people from entirely different worlds. Neither of them noticed, in that quiet, tender moment, the shadow that passed briefly across the window outside, nor the soft click of a camera capturing an image that would soon find its way into the hands of people whose interest in Rowan's whereabouts carried far darker intentions than simple curiosity. Far beyond the ordinary streets of Elena's city, hidden behind old forests and mountain passes that no ordinary map could accurately trace, existed a realm few humans ever knew existed. It was a kingdom, built into the bones of ancient hills, its structures blending seamlessly with the natural landscape, home to a people whose true nature remained carefully guarded from the outside world. This was the kingdom of Vermont, and for 3 long weeks, it had existed without its rightful leader. Inside the great hall of Vermont's central stronghold, tension hung thick in the air, as council members gathered around a long wooden table, their expressions ranging from barely concealed panic to calculated ambition. At the head of the room stood Nora, a sharp-eyed woman who had served as chief advisor to the missing Alpha King for over a decade, her posture rigid with the weight of responsibility she had carried alone since his disappearance. "We cannot continue like this," said a broad-shouldered man near the far end of the table, his voice carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His name was Edwin, leader of one of Vermont's most powerful allied packs, and his patience for the ongoing search had clearly worn thin. 3 weeks, with no word, no sign, nothing but silence. The kingdom needs stability, and stability requires leadership. If Rowan cannot be found, we must consider the alternative. The alternative being yourself, I presume, Nora said coolly, her sharp gaze fixed on Edwin with barely concealed suspicion. The alternative being someone who can hold this kingdom together, while the true leadership question is properly settled, Edwin replied smoothly, though the ambition beneath his words remained unmistakable to everyone present. Nora's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, another voice spoke up from further down the table. This belonged to Daniel, a younger council member whose loyalty to Rowan had never wavered, despite the mounting pressure from those eager to see the throne claimed by someone else. "The Alpha King disappeared under suspicious circumstances," Daniel said firmly. "We all remember the reports from that night, the signs of a struggle near the eastern border, the blood found without a body to explain it. Someone attacked him, and until we know who and why, declaring him lost and moving forward with a new leader feels premature, if not outright dangerous." "Premature or not," Edwin countered, "the kingdom cannot function in this limbo forever. Trade negotiations with neighboring territories have stalled. Internal disputes go unresolved without a final authority to settle them. Every day we wait, we grow weaker, more vulnerable, to those who might see our current instability as an opportunity." Nora rose from her seat, commanding the attention of everyone in the room with the natural authority she had cultivated over years of service. "I have organized search parties, combing every territory within 3 days' travel of where the attack occurred. I have reached out to allied kingdoms, requesting any information about sightings or rumors that might lead us to him. I refuse to abandon this search while any possibility remains that our king is alive." "And if he isn't?" Edwin pressed, his voice carrying an edge of challenge. "How long do we wait before accepting reality?" The room fell silent, the question hanging heavily in the air, unanswered, because no one present truly wanted to consider what it would mean if Rowan never returned. Nora's expression remained composed, though internally, doubt gnawed at her more than she cared to admit. She had known Rowan since he was a young boy, had watched him grow into a leader who balanced strength with genuine compassion for his people, a rare combination in a world where power so often corrupted even the most well-intentioned rulers. "We continue searching," she said finally, her voice firm despite the uncertainty churning beneath her composed exterior, "for as long as necessary." As the council meeting dissolved into smaller, tense conversations, Daniel approached Nora privately, his expression troubled. "You don't believe Edwin's growing support is a coincidence, do you?" he asked quietly. Nora glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before responding. "I've suspected for some time that whoever attacked Rowan didn't act alone, and didn't act without purpose beyond simple ambush. Edwin has wanted greater influence over Vermont's throne for years. It would be foolish to ignore the possibility that he had some hand in what happened, directly or indirectly. Do you have proof?" "Not yet," Nora admitted, "but I intend to find it, one way or another." Meanwhile, in the shadowed corners of Vermont's lower territories, away from the polished halls of the council chamber, a very different conversation unfolded. Two figures met beneath the cover of night, near the ruins of an old watchtower, their voices low, their movements cautious, aware that discovery would mean severe consequences for the plans they had set into motion weeks earlier. "He's still alive," one of them said, frustration evident in his tone. "Our informant spotted him in the human city 3 days ago, though we lost track of him again shortly after." "That's unacceptable," the other replied sharply. "We were assured the attack would be fatal. Instead, we've spent weeks chasing rumors, while Nora's search parties grow more organized by the day." "He was gravely wounded when he fled," the first man said. "It's possible he simply hasn't recovered enough to return and reclaim his position. But if he's hiding among humans, someone must be helping him. No injured man survives alone in unfamiliar territory for this long without assistance." "Then find whoever is helping him," the second voice commanded, cold and calculating, "and eliminate the problem before Rowan regains enough strength to return to Vermont and expose everything we've worked toward." "And if this helper is innocent, uninvolved in kingdom affairs entirely?" A pause stretched between them, heavy with implication. "Innocence is irrelevant," the second voice finally said. "Only the outcome matters. Find them both, and ensure neither becomes a problem we cannot control." The two figures parted ways beneath the cover of darkness, their conspiracy deepening with each passing day that Rowan remained missing from Vermont's throne. Unaware of exactly how close their search had already come, unaware that their informant's fleeting glimpse of Rowan near a small city park had already set in motion a chain of events that would soon lead directly to Elena's quiet, unsuspecting doorstep. Back within the Great Hall, Nora retreated to her private study once the council meeting concluded, pulling out old maps and reports, searching for any pattern she might have overlooked in her weeks of investigation. She trusted very few people within Vermont's current political climate, uncertain how deep the roots of betrayal might extend, uncertain who among her closest allies might secretly serve interests other than the rightful throne. She thought of Rowan as a young man, eager and earnest, determined to rule differently than his predecessors, determined to build a kingdom based on genuine strength rather than fear alone. She remembered his insistence, years earlier, that true leadership meant protecting even the smallest and most vulnerable among his people, human and otherwise, a philosophy that had earned him deep loyalty among common folk, but quiet resentment among ambitious nobles who preferred a ruler more easily manipulated toward their own interests. "Where are you, Rowan?" she murmured to herself, staring at the map spread across her desk, tracing possible routes he might have taken while fleeing his attackers. "Please, wherever you are, stay alive long enough for us to find you." Unbeknownst to Nora, her prayers had already been partially answered, though the location she sought remained hidden within the vast, unfamiliar sprawl of a human city she had never had reason to search before, a city where an ordinary bakery worker named Elena Marsh had unknowingly become the final barrier standing between her missing king and the forces determined to ensure he never reclaimed his rightful throne. As night deepened over Vermont, Nora finally allowed herself a moment of quiet vulnerability, alone in her study, away from the watchful eyes of council members and ambitious rivals alike. She thought of the promise she had made to Rowan's late father, years before his death, to protect his son no matter the cost, and she felt the weight of that promise pressing heavily upon her now, as the search for Vermont's missing king stretched into its fourth agonizing week with no resolution in sight. She did not yet know that time was running shorter than she feared, that the very people responsible for Rowan's near-fatal ambush had already narrowed their search to the human city, where he currently sought refuge, and that within days, their combined efforts would collide violently with the quiet, unsuspecting life of the woman who had shown Rowan nothing but kindness since the moment she found him bleeding in a forgotten alley. 2 weeks had passed since Elena first found Rowan in that alley, and though neither of them spoke openly about it, both sensed that time was becoming more precious, more fragile, than either wanted to admit. Rowan's strength had returned almost completely now, his movements no longer betraying any lingering injury, his posture carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had fully recovered from whatever ordeal had left him broken on Millhaven Street. One morning, Elena woke to the smell of fresh bread filling her small apartment, an aroma so precise and familiar that she nearly forgot, for a moment, that she wasn't at the bakery. She stepped into the kitchen to find Rowan carefully pulling a golden loaf from her small oven, his expression a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. "I asked Oliver to teach me," Rowan admitted, noticing her surprised expression. "I visited the bakery yesterday, while you were finishing your shift, and I told him I wanted to learn something to thank you properly for everything you've done." Elena stared at the loaf, genuinely touched by the gesture. "You went to the bakery? Without me knowing?" "I was careful," Rowan assured her quickly, noticing the flicker of concern crossing her face. "Oliver seems like a good man. He didn't ask too many questions." Elena approached the loaf, breaking off a small piece and tasting it, surprised by how genuinely good it was, dense and warm, with just the right amount of crust. "This is actually really good, Rowan." "High praise, coming from someone who bakes professionally," he replied, a small, proud smile spreading across his face. They sat together at her small table, sharing the bread with butter and honey, the morning sunlight filtering warmly through her kitchen window. In moments like these, Elena found it easy to forget the strange mysteries surrounding Rowan's past, easy to simply enjoy the comfortable companionship that had grown steadily between them over these past 2 weeks. "Can I ask you something?" Rowan said after a while, his tone more serious than the light mood of the morning suggested. "Of course." "Have you ever wanted more than this?" he asked, gesturing vaguely around the small apartment. "More than the bakery, more than Millhaven Street? Have you ever wanted to see what exists beyond the boundaries of this city?" Elena considered the question carefully, surprised by its depth. "I used to dream about traveling when I was younger," she admitted. "My parents didn't have much money, so we never went anywhere beyond a few nearby towns. After they passed, building this life, the bakery job, this apartment, it felt like enough of an achievement on its own. I suppose I stopped dreaming much bigger than that." "That's a shame," Rowan said quietly. "You deserve to see more of what the world has to offer, Elena. You deserve adventures beyond these familiar streets," says the man who showed up injured in an alley, with no possessions to his name. Elena teased gently, trying to lighten the sudden weight in his tone. Rowan chuckled, though something bittersweet lingered behind his amusement. "Perhaps my own adventures haven't turned out quite as glamorous as they might sound," he admitted, "but I still believe you deserve the chance to see beyond these streets, whatever that might eventually look like." Elena studied his expression, sensing again that familiar undercurrent of something unspoken, some larger truth he continued to hold just beyond her reach. "Rowan," she said carefully, "whatever you're not telling me, I hope you know you can trust me with it. I've never once judged you for the mystery surrounding your past. I only want to understand you better." "I know," he said softly, "and I promise, Elena, the truth is coming. I've simply been waiting for the right moment, waiting until I'm certain revealing everything won't place you in unnecessary danger." "Danger from what?" she pressed gently. Before he could answer, Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Oliver, reminding her she was due at the bakery within the hour, for an unexpected double shift, one of the regular staff having called in sick. She sighed, glancing regretfully at Rowan. "Duty calls," she said, rising from the table. "We'll finish this conversation tonight, I promise." Rowan nodded, though something in his expression suggested reluctance to let the moment pass without further explanation. Still, he respected her need to leave for work, watching quietly as she gathered her things and prepared to head out into the ordinary rhythm of her daily life. "Be careful today," he said as she reached the door, an unusual seriousness in his tone that caught her slightly off guard. "It's just the bakery, Rowan," she said, smiling reassuringly. "Nothing dangerous about kneading dough." "Still," he insisted, "please, Just be careful." Elena nodded, though she couldn't quite shake the unease his words left behind as she made her way toward 2nd Street. Throughout her shift, memories of their conversation lingered in her mind, Rowan's cryptic warnings mixing uneasily with the growing affection she felt toward him, an affection she hadn't fully acknowledged to herself until recently. At the bakery, Oliver noticed her distracted expression as she worked, kneading dough, with less enthusiasm than usual. "Everything all right, Elena?" he asked, concern coloring his weathered face. "You seem distant today." "Just tired," she said, offering a small smile. "Thank you, by the way, for teaching Rowan how to bake bread. He surprised me with a loaf this morning." Oliver's expression softened into something knowing. "That young man cares deeply for you, Elena. I could see it clearly in how carefully he watched every step I showed him, determined to get every detail exactly right, just so he could bring you something meaningful." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "We're just friends, Oliver." "Perhaps," Oliver said, though his skeptical tone suggested he believed otherwise. "Still, be careful with your heart, dear. Whoever that young man truly is, there's clearly more to his story than either of you have shared with me." Elena considered Oliver's words carefully throughout the remainder of her shift, wondering how obvious her growing feelings for Rowan had become to those around her. Wondering, too, what exactly Oliver had sensed about the mysterious depths hidden beneath Rowan's carefully guarded exterior. By the time her shift finally ended, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, though her mind remained sharp with anticipation for the conversation awaiting her back at the apartment. She walked home quickly, eager to finally understand the truth Rowan had promised to reveal, unaware that her walk home that evening would take a considerably more frightening turn than she anticipated. As she turned onto Willow Lane, Elena noticed 2 unfamiliar men standing near the entrance to her apartment building, their posture alert and watchful in a way that immediately unsettled her. They wore ordinary clothing, nothing that would draw suspicion from a casual observer, but something about the way they studied every person passing by, the way their eyes lingered a beat too long on her own face as she approached, sent a chill of genuine fear through her chest. She hesitated, considering whether to turn back, to find another route home, but her apartment, and Rowan, lay just beyond those 2 watchful strangers, and something told her that avoiding them entirely wasn't necessarily the safest choice available to her. Taking a steadying breath, Elena continued walking forward, her heart pounding with each step, praying silently that whatever business those men had near her building had nothing whatsoever to do with the man currently waiting inside her small, humble apartment. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached the entrance to her building, keeping her eyes forward, refusing to give the 2 strangers any reason to suspect she had noticed their watchful presence. One of them, a tall man with a scar running along his jawline, glanced at her briefly as she passed, his expression unreadable, though something in his gaze felt calculating, predatory in a way that made her skin prickle with unease. She hurried up the stairs to her apartment, fumbling with her keys, casting anxious glances back down the stairwell to ensure neither man had followed her inside. By the time she reached her door, her heart pounded so violently she could hear it in her own ears. She let herself in quickly, locking the door firmly behind her. "Rowan," she called, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. He appeared immediately from the living room, his expression shifting from casual warmth to sharp alertness the moment he registered the fear in her voice. "What happened?" he asked, closing the distance between them in a few quick strides. "There were 2 men outside," Elena said, still catching her breath, standing near the entrance. "I don't know why, but something about them felt wrong, dangerous." Rowan's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking toward the window with the same predatory alertness she had noticed from him before. "Describe them," he said urgently. One was tall, with a scar along his jaw. The other was shorter, heavier build, dark hair. They weren't doing anything obviously threatening, just standing there, watching people come and go. Rowan's expression darkened considerably, and Elena watched as something shifted behind his eyes, a controlled fury mixed with fierce protectiveness that she had never witnessed from him before. "They've found me," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "Found you? Rowan, what's going on? Please, just tell me the truth now." He turned to face her fully, his expression torn between the urgent need to protect her and the promise he had made to eventually explain everything honestly. Finally, he made his decision, closing the remaining distance between them and taking her hands gently in his own. Elena, I need you to trust me completely right now, more than you ever have before. Those men outside are not ordinary criminals. They work for people who tried to kill me weeks ago, before you found me in that alley. If they've traced me here, it means my presence has put you in genuine danger, and I need to get you somewhere safe immediately. Elena's mind reeled, questions flooding through her thoughts faster than she could voice them. Tried to kill you? Rowan, who are these people? Why would anyone want you dead? I promise I'll explain everything, Rowan said urgently, already moving toward her window to check the street below. But right now, we need to leave, quickly and quietly. Before Elena could respond, a heavy knock sounded against her apartment door. 3 sharp raps that carried none of the gentle uncertainty Grace's earlier visit had held. Rowan's entire body tensed, his expression hardening into something fierce and protective. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice carrying an authority Elena had never heard from him before, an authority that brooked absolutely no argument. She obeyed instinctively, moving behind him as he approached the door cautiously. Through the peephole, he could see the same tall man with the scarred jaw that Elena had described, standing directly outside, flanked by his heavier companion. "Rowan," the man outside called, his voice carrying false pleasantness that did nothing to mask the underlying threat. "We know you're in there. It would be so much easier for everyone involved if you simply came out peacefully." Rowan's grip tightened on the door handle, his mind racing through possible options. Fighting them directly in Elena's apartment risked her safety far too greatly. Attempting to flee through the front door would put them directly in the path of danger. He needed another way out, and quickly. "The fire escape," he whispered urgently to Elena, gesturing toward her bedroom window. "Can we reach it from there?" "Yes," Elena breathed, her voice shaking, but her resolve steady, despite her fear. "This way." They moved quickly and quietly toward her bedroom, Rowan positioning himself protectively between Elena and the front door as they retreated. Behind them, the knocking grew more insistent, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone attempting to force the lock. Elena threw open her bedroom window, the cool evening air rushing in as she climbed carefully onto the metal fire escape platform outside. Rowan followed close behind, glancing back briefly toward the sound of splintering wood as the front door finally gave way under the pressure of forceful entry. "Go, quickly," Rowan urged, guiding Elena down the metal stairs with careful, steadying hands, ensuring she didn't stumble in her haste and fear. They descended rapidly, the clanging of their footsteps against metal echoing loudly in the quiet evening air. Behind them, Elena heard voices from her apartment, low and urgent, though she couldn't make out specific words over the pounding of her own heart and the metallic rhythm of their hurried descent. They reached the ground level, and Rowan immediately guided her away from the main street, cutting through a narrow alley he seemed to navigate with surprising familiarity, despite having never lived in this neighborhood before this night. "How do you know these streets so well?" Elena asked breathlessly as they hurried through the shadowed passage. "I memorized every possible escape route the moment I recovered enough strength to walk," Rowan admitted. "I feared something like this might eventually happen." They emerged onto a quieter side street several blocks from Elena's apartment, and Rowan finally allowed them to slow their pace slightly, though his eyes continued scanning their surroundings with unwavering vigilance. "We can't go back there," Elena said, her voice still trembling from the adrenaline of their narrow escape. "Rowan, my home. Everything I own is back there." "I know," Rowan said gently, guilt evident in his expression, "and I am truly sorry for bringing this danger into your life. But right now, our safety matters more than any possessions we might have left behind." They continued walking, weaving through quieter streets and alleys, Rowan clearly working to put as much distance as possible between themselves and whoever had invaded Elena's apartment. After nearly 20 minutes of tense, watchful walking, they finally paused beneath the shelter of an old bridge overpass, catching their breath in the relative safety of shadows. "Rowan," Elena said firmly, once she had recovered enough breath to speak clearly, "I need the truth now. All of it. No more waiting for the right moment. Those men just broke into my home searching for you. I deserve to understand exactly what danger I've walked into." Rowan looked at her for a long, heavy moment, the weight of his secret finally becoming too significant to withhold any longer, especially now that it had directly endangered the woman who had shown him nothing but kindness since the very first night they met. "You're right," he said quietly, resolve settling into his expression. "You deserve the complete truth, Elena, regardless of how difficult it might be to hear, or how much it changes between us. He took a steadying breath, meeting her eyes directly, preparing finally to share the secret he had carried since the moment she first offered him water in that forgotten alley on Millhaven Street. "My name isn't simply Rowan," he began slowly. "That's part of my name. Yes, but there's a title that comes with it. One that explains everything you've noticed about me these past weeks. My strength, my instincts, the danger currently following us through these streets." Elena held her breath, sensing that whatever he was about to reveal would reshape everything she thought she understood about the man she had grown to care for so deeply over these past weeks. "I am the Alpha King of Vermont," Rowan said finally, his voice steady despite the enormity of the confession. "Leader of a hidden kingdom you've never heard of, ruler of a people whose existence remains carefully concealed from the human world you've known your entire life. 3 weeks ago, before you found me, my own council members attempted to have me killed, hoping to seize control of my throne. I have been hiding here, among humans, recovering from that betrayal, and trying to determine who among my own people I can still trust." Elena stared at him, stunned into silence, the revelation crashing over her like a physical wave, reshaping every memory of their weeks together into an entirely new context. The heightened senses, the healing speed, the careful, disciplined movements, all of it suddenly made sense, in a way that felt both impossible and undeniably true, given everything she had personally witnessed. "An Alpha King," she repeated slowly, testing the words against everything she thought she knew about reality. "Rowan, that's not possible. Kingdoms like that don't exist, not really, not hidden from everyone."
"I understand your disbelief," Rowan said gently, though urgency remained clear in his tone given their current dangerous circumstances.
"But everything I've told you is true, Elena, and right now, those men searching for us work for the very people who orchestrated my attempted assassination. We need to find somewhere safe, immediately, so I can properly explain everything and figure out our next move together." Elena's mind raced, questions multiplying faster than she could process them, disbelief warring against the undeniable evidence of danger currently pursuing them through the darkened streets. But beneath the shock and confusion, something steadier remained, the same instinct that had compelled her to help a wounded stranger weeks ago, an unwavering trust in the man standing before her, regardless of what impossible title he now claimed. "All right," she said finally, steadying her voice, despite the chaos of emotions churning within her. "Tell me where we need to go, and let's figure this out together." They found temporary shelter in a small, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that asked few questions and required only cash payment for a room. Rowan paid the clerk with money Elena hadn't even realized he possessed, explaining briefly that he had kept a small emergency reserve hidden since the night of his escape, anticipating exactly this kind of dangerous situation might eventually arise. Once inside the modest room, door locked and curtains drawn tightly, Elena finally allowed herself to process the enormity of everything Rowan had revealed. She sat on the edge of the small bed, her hands still trembling slightly from adrenaline and shock, while Rowan paced near the window, his mind clearly working through strategic possibilities for their next move. "Tell me everything," Elena said quietly. "From the beginning. I need to understand exactly what world I've stepped into." Rowan paused his pacing, turning to face her fully, recognizing the fairness of her request, despite the danger still pressing upon them. He took a seat in the room's single worn armchair, positioning himself where he could still watch the window and door simultaneously. Old habits of vigilance clearly impossible to fully set aside even now. "Vermont has existed for centuries," he began, "hidden within territories that human maps simply don't record accurately, protected by ancient boundaries that keep our world separate from yours. My people possess abilities beyond typical human capability: strength, heightened senses, accelerated healing, the very traits you noticed in me these past weeks, without fully understanding their source." "Like something from old folklore," Elena murmured, memories of childhood stories about hidden creatures suddenly taking on unsettling new weight. "Perhaps," Rowan acknowledged, "though the reality is far more complicated than simple stories ever capture. My father ruled Vermont for nearly 30 years before his death, and I inherited the throne shortly after, determined to lead differently than some of my predecessors, with genuine consideration for both the powerful and the vulnerable among our people. How did you end up alone, injured, in an alley on Millhaven Street? Rowan's expression darkened considerably as he recalled the events. I was traveling near Vermont's eastern border, addressing a dispute between two allied territories, when I was ambushed by a group of armed attackers. I recognized several of them as members of my own guard, men I had trusted completely, which made the betrayal all the more devastating. I managed to escape, though not without significant injury, and in my desperation to survive, I crossed into human territory, hoping the unfamiliar surroundings might provide temporary safety, while I recovered enough strength to determine my next move. And then I found you, Elena said softly, pieces of the timeline finally clicking together in her understanding. Yes, Rowan confirmed, warmth entering his expression, despite the seriousness of their conversation. You found me at what was possibly the lowest, most vulnerable moment of my entire life, and rather than walking past like everyone else that evening, you showed me a kindness I hadn't experienced from anyone in longer than I care to admit. Elena absorbed his words carefully, memories of that first night replaying through her mind with new understanding. Who ordered the attack against you, do you know? I have suspicions, Rowan admitted, though nothing confirmed. Several council members have long desired greater influence over Vermont's throne, viewing my approach to leadership as too lenient, too concerned with fairness rather than pure strength and dominance. I believe one or more of them orchestrated the ambush, hoping to eliminate me and claim greater control during whatever chaos followed my death. And now they know you survived, Elena said, understanding dawning. That's why those men came to my apartment. Yes, Rowan confirmed grimly. Whoever sent them must have located me somehow, perhaps through careless movement on my part, perhaps through simple bad luck. Either way, they know I'm alive, and they clearly intend to finish what they started. Elena sat in thoughtful silence for a long moment, processing everything, weighing the impossible reality against the genuine care and connection she had built with Rowan over these past weeks. Finally she spoke, her voice steady despite the fear still coursing through her. What happens now? Can you return to your kingdom safely? Can you expose whoever betrayed you? Rowan sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. Returning carries significant risk, especially without knowing exactly who among my own people can still be trusted. If I return unprepared, I risk walking directly into another assassination attempt, this time potentially successful. But remaining hidden indefinitely isn't a viable solution either, especially now that my enemies have located me here in the human world. What if you had proof? Elena asked suddenly, an idea forming in her mind. Proof of who attacked you, of who sent those men tonight? Wouldn't that change things? Allow you to return with evidence rather than simply your word against theirs? Rowan considered her suggestion carefully. It would help significantly, yes. If I could identify and expose the conspirators definitively, it would rally loyal supporters to my side and undermine whatever influence the traitors have gained during my absence. Then let's find that proof, Elena said with sudden determination, surprising even herself with the conviction in her own voice. Rowan looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and profound gratitude. Elena, this isn't your fight. You've already sacrificed so much simply by helping me these past weeks. I cannot ask you to risk yourself further in a conflict that belongs entirely to my world, not yours. You didn't ask, Elena replied firmly. I'm offering. Rowan, whatever you are, Alpha King or otherwise, you're still the same person who learned to bake bread just to thank me for a bit of kindness. I'm not walking away now, not when you need help most. Something shifted in Rowan's expression, admiration and affection blending together as he studied the woman before him, unwavering in her resolve despite the impossible danger surrounding them both. You truly are remarkable, Elena Marsh, he said softly. I don't think I've properly thanked you for everything you've done, for everything you continue to offer, without any expectation of reward. You can thank me by staying alive, Elena said, a small, determined smile finding its way onto her face, despite the tension of their circumstances. Now, tell me, those men who came to my apartment, do you recognize either of them? Could they lead us toward whoever orchestrated everything? Rowan considered the question seriously. The taller man, the one with the scar. I believe I've seen him before, serving under one of my council members named Edwin. If that connection holds true, it would suggest Edwin's involvement in this conspiracy runs deeper than mere political ambition. Then that's where we start, Elena said. Finding proof connecting this Edwin to tonight's attack, and to whatever happened 3 weeks ago at your kingdom's border. Rowan nodded slowly, appreciation and determination mixing within his expression as he considered their next steps. It won't be easy, he warned, and it will be dangerous. More dangerous than anything you've faced so far in this entire ordeal. I didn't expect easy, Elena replied simply. I just expect us to face it together. As night deepened outside their modest motel room, Rowan and Elena began carefully planning their next move, combining Rowan's knowledge of Vermont's political landscape with Elena's practical, resourceful thinking, honed through years of building an independent life from very little. Neither of them fully grasped, in that quiet, determined moment, exactly how dangerous the path ahead would prove to be, nor how significantly their combined efforts would soon reshape the very future of Vermont's hidden kingdom. But for now, wrapped in the shared warmth of mutual trust and growing affection, they focused only on the next step forward, determined to expose the truth behind Rowan's betrayal and reclaim the throne that rightfully belonged to a king who had proven, through every small kindness and careful action these past weeks, that he deserved to lead his people with the same compassion Elena had shown him from the very beginning of their unlikely, extraordinary friendship. The following morning, Rowan and Elena left the motel before sunrise, moving carefully through quiet streets toward a small internet cafe several miles from Elena's neighborhood, a location Rowan hoped would be far enough removed from their pursuers to offer temporary safety. Elena purchased 2 cups of coffee from a nearby stand, while Rowan settled at a computer terminal, his fingers moving with surprising familiarity across the keyboard. You know how to use human technology? Elena asked, settling into the seat beside him, genuinely curious. Vermont isn't entirely disconnected from the human world, Rowan explained. We monitor certain developments, maintain limited contact with trusted human allies who understand our existence. I learned enough during my education to navigate basic technology when necessary. He began searching through public records, news archives, and social media platforms, cross-referencing names and locations connected to Edwin's known associates within Vermont's political structure. Elena watched closely, occasionally offering suggestions drawn from her own more practical understanding of human information systems. After nearly an hour of careful searching, Rowan's expression sharpened with sudden recognition. There, he said, pointing toward a grainy photograph displayed on the screen. That's the same scarred man from your apartment. His name is Marcus, and he's listed here as part of a private security firm with documented connections to Edwin's territory. That's not exactly damning evidence, Elena pointed out gently. Working for a security firm doesn't prove Edwin ordered an assassination attempt. You're right, Rowan admitted, frustration evident in his tone. We need something more concrete. Communication records, financial transactions, anything that directly connects Edwin to the attack against me and to last night's assault on your apartment. Elena considered the problem carefully. What about your advisor, the one you mentioned, Nora? If she's been investigating your disappearance from Vermont's side, she might already have gathered evidence we don't currently have access to. Nora, Rowan repeated thoughtfully, you may be right. If anyone within Vermont remains fiercely loyal and has been actively searching for answers, it would be her. But reaching her safely presents its own challenges. I have no way of contacting Vermont directly from here, without risking exposure to whoever might be monitoring communications. Is there truly no way? Elena pressed. No trusted method of reaching your own people? Rowan considered the question seriously, memories surfacing of contingency plans established long before this crisis began. There is one possibility, he said slowly. A small signal. A particular mark left in specific locations, known only to Vermont's most trusted scouts, used historically during times of crisis, to summon aid discreetly. If I could reach one such location without being followed, it might alert Nora to my exact whereabouts without alerting my enemies simultaneously. Then let's find that location, Elena said with renewed determination. They spent the remainder of the morning traveling carefully across the city, Rowan navigating toward a small, unremarkable park near the city's edge, a location he explained held historical significance as a discreet meeting point established generations earlier by Vermont scouts monitoring human territories. Elena kept watch for any signs of pursuit, while Rowan carefully etched a specific symbol into the bark of an old oak tree standing near the park's edge, a mark that would remain invisible to untrained human eyes, but immediately recognizable to any loyal Vermont scout who happened upon it. "Now we wait," Rowan said, though tension remained evident in his posture, as they retreated to a nearby cafe to maintain discreet observation of the surrounding area. The waiting proved agonizing, hours stretching by, with no sign that their signal had been noticed or understood. Elena grew increasingly anxious as afternoon light began fading toward evening, worried that Edwin's men might locate them again before any help from Vermont arrived. "What if no one finds the mark?" she asked quietly, watching Rowan's carefully controlled expression for any hint of the same worry she felt building within herself. "Then we'll find another approach," Rowan assured her, though his own confidence seemed to waver slightly as the hours continued passing without incident. Just as dusk began settling over the city, casting long shadows across the quiet park, Elena noticed a figure approaching from the tree line, moving with a careful, disciplined grace that immediately reminded her of Rowan's own distinctive posture. Her breath caught, uncertain whether this represented salvation or further danger. "Rowan," she whispered urgently, nodding toward the approaching figure. Rowan turned, his expression shifting rapidly from cautious alertness to stunned recognition. "Daniel," he breathed, rising immediately from their table. The younger man approached quickly, and upon reaching them, immediately dropped to one knee before Rowan, his head bowed in a gesture of deep, unwavering respect. "Your Majesty," Daniel said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "We feared you had perished. Nora has organized search efforts across every territory imaginable, refusing to accept the possibility of your death." Elena stared, stunned, as the scene unfolded before her, watching this stranger kneel, with genuine reverence, before the man she had known simply as Rowan, the man who had learned to bake bread just to express gratitude for her kindness, the man whose title, until this very moment witnessed firsthand, had remained an abstract concept rather than a tangible, undeniable reality. "Rise, Daniel," Rowan said, his voice carrying an authority Elena hadn't fully appreciated, until seeing it demonstrated so clearly before another person entirely. "Tell me everything. How did you find the signal so quickly?" "I've been monitoring known scout locations daily since your disappearance," Daniel explained, rising to his feet. "Nora insisted we maintain vigilance at every possible contact point, refusing to believe you had truly abandoned Vermont without explanation." "Good," Rowan said approvingly. "Nora's instincts remain as sharp as ever. Daniel, I need you to relay information back to her immediately. I have reason to believe Edwin orchestrated both the initial attack against me and a subsequent assault against this woman's home last night, seeking to eliminate me permanently before I could return and expose the conspiracy." Daniel's eyes flicked toward Elena for the first time, curiosity and cautious respect evident in his expression. "This is the human who has been sheltering you?" he asked, though his tone carried none of the disdain Elena had half expected, given the vast difference between their worlds. "This is Elena," Rowan said, and something in his voice carried unmistakable warmth and deep respect. "She found me broken and dying in a human alley, and showed me more genuine kindness these past weeks than I've experienced from many within my own court over recent years. Without her, I would not be standing here today." Daniel bowed his head respectfully toward Elena. "Then Vermont owes you a debt that will not be forgotten, Elena. Thank you for protecting our king." Elena, still reeling from the surreal reality unfolding before her, managed a small, uncertain nod. "I only did what felt right," she said quietly. "Anyone would have helped him." "Not everyone," Daniel replied gently. "Not in a world grown increasingly calculating and self-interested. Your kindness matters more than you realize, Elena." Rowan turned back toward Daniel, urgency returning to his expression. "We need to move quickly and carefully. Edwin's men located us once already. They may still be searching this area. Can you arrange safe transport back toward Vermont's borders, along with adequate protection to ensure we arrive safely?" "I can arrange it within the hour," Daniel confirmed. "Nora will want to hear everything you've discovered personally, and I suspect she already possesses additional evidence regarding Edwin's involvement that she's been gathering carefully during your absence." As Daniel moved away to arrange their transportation, Rowan turned to Elena, his expression softening with a mixture of relief and profound gratitude. "We found help," he said quietly. "Real help, finally, after weeks of uncertainty." "I'm happy for you," Elena said, though something uncertain lingered in her tone. A sudden awareness of how vastly different their futures now appeared. Hers rooted firmly in the ordinary human world she had always known. His belonging to a hidden kingdom she was only now beginning to comprehend existed at all. Rowan noticed her hesitation immediately, reaching gently for her hand. "Elena, whatever happens next, I want you beside me through this. You've already sacrificed so much on my behalf, and I refuse to simply leave you behind, now that safety finally seems within reach." "Rowan," Elena said carefully, "I'm human. Whatever kingdom you're returning to, whatever throne you're meant to reclaim, that world isn't mine. I don't belong there. You belong wherever you choose to belong," Rowan said firmly, his amber eyes holding hers with unwavering conviction. "And I sincerely hope, Elena, that you choose to remain beside me, regardless of the complications our different worlds might present." Before Elena could formulate a response to the weight of his words, Daniel returned, confirming that safe transportation had been arranged and would arrive within minutes. The moment of vulnerability between them passed, replaced by the urgent necessity of preparing for a journey that would carry them both toward a hidden kingdom Elena had never imagined existed, toward a confrontation that would determine not only Rowan's rightful claim to Vermont's throne, but also the uncertain, unprecedented future of whatever remarkable connection had grown between a humble human woman and the Alpha King she had unknowingly rescued from near-certain death. The journey toward Vermont unfolded like something from a dream Elena never could have anticipated experiencing firsthand. Daniel guided them through a hidden pathway, beginning at the edge of the same small park where they had waited anxiously for hours, a path that wound through dense forest, before revealing an entrance concealed within what appeared, to ordinary human eyes, as nothing more than an unremarkable rocky hillside. As they passed through the concealed entrance, Elena felt a strange shift in the air around her, as though crossing some invisible boundary separating two entirely different worlds. Beyond the hidden entrance, Vermont unfolded before her in breathtaking detail. Ancient stone structures blending seamlessly with towering trees and rolling hills, architecture that somehow felt both remarkably advanced and deeply rooted in ancient traditions simultaneously. "It's beautiful," Elena murmured, unable to fully process the reality of standing within a kingdom she had never known existed until mere hours earlier. "Welcome to Vermont," Rowan said softly beside her, quiet pride evident in his voice, despite the tension of their current circumstances. They moved quickly through the outer territories, Daniel leading them along carefully chosen paths, designed to avoid drawing unnecessary attention, before they could properly assess the political situation awaiting them. Word of Rowan's return needed to reach Nora before Edwin's allies became aware, ensuring the advisor could prepare appropriate support before any confrontation occurred. They reached a smaller, secondary stronghold on Vermont's outskirts, where Daniel had arranged for Nora to meet them privately, away from the prying eyes and ears of the main council chamber. When Nora arrived, her composed exterior cracked immediately upon seeing Rowan alive and standing before her, relief and profound emotion breaking through years of carefully maintained professional restraint. "Your Majesty," she breathed, moving forward and embracing him briefly, before stepping back, professional composure quickly reasserting itself, despite the obvious depth of her relief. "We feared the worst. 3 weeks with no word, no sign. I'm sorry for the worry I've caused," Rowan said sincerely. "But I needed time to recover and determine who among my own council could still be trusted before returning." Nora's gaze shifted toward Elena, curiosity and gratitude mixing within her expression, as Daniel quickly explained the role Elena had played in Rowan's survival and recovery. "Then Vermont owes you an enormous debt," Nora said, addressing Elena directly with genuine warmth. "Thank you for protecting our king when he needed it most." "I only offered basic kindness," Elena said, still adjusting to the surreal reality of receiving such formal gratitude from people whose entire world remained largely mysterious to her. "Sometimes basic kindness proves more valuable than any grand gesture," Nora replied thoughtfully. "Now, Your Majesty, we have urgent matters requiring your immediate attention." Nora quickly outlined everything she had discovered during weeks of careful investigation. Financial records suggesting Edwin had been secretly funding additional private guards beyond his officially sanctioned allotment. Testimony from a lower-ranking guard willing to confirm Edwin's direct involvement in orchestrating the border ambush. And now, evidence connecting Edwin's private security contacts to the assault against Elena's apartment. This should be more than sufficient to expose his betrayal before the full council, Rowan said, reviewing the evidence Nora had compiled with careful, methodical thoroughness. There remains one complication, Nora warned. Edwin has spent these past weeks cultivating support among several other council members, positioning himself as the stable alternative to your uncertain fate. Even with clear evidence of his betrayal, some may hesitate to immediately accept the full consequences of exposing his conspiracy, fearing the resulting instability. Then we present the evidence carefully, methodically, ensuring no reasonable doubt remains about his guilt, Rowan said firmly. I refuse to allow Edwin's manipulation to further destabilize Vermont, simply because addressing the truth proves inconvenient for those who benefited from my prolonged absence. They spent the remainder of the evening preparing carefully for the following day's council session, Nora and Daniel briefing Rowan on every political development that had occurred during his absence, while Elena remained largely quiet, absorbing the complex political dynamics of a world she was only beginning to understand. Later that night, once preparations had concluded and Nora and Daniel had retired to their own quarters, Rowan found Elena standing alone on a small balcony overlooking Vermont's peaceful, moonlit landscape, her expression thoughtful and slightly overwhelmed. It's a lot to take in, Rowan said gently, joining her at the balcony railing. It truly is, Elena admitted. A few weeks ago, my biggest concern was whether Oliver's cinnamon rolls would sell out before the afternoon rush. Now, I'm standing in a hidden kingdom, watching you prepare to expose a conspiracy against your own throne. I understand if this feels overwhelming, Rowan said carefully. If you wish to return to your ordinary life once this crisis resolves, I would understand completely, and I would ensure your safe return, without any lingering danger from Edwin's associates. Elena turned to face him fully, searching his expression in the soft moonlight. Is that what you want, Rowan? For me to simply return to my ordinary life once you've reclaimed your throne? No, Rowan admitted immediately, his voice carrying quiet vulnerability, rarely seen from someone holding such significant authority. That is absolutely not what I want. These past weeks with you, Elena, learning to bake bread, sharing simple meals, building genuine trust and connection, they have meant more to me than nearly anything else in my entire life. I want you to stay, not out of obligation or gratitude, but because I have grown to care for you more deeply than I ever expected possible. Elena's heart raced at his sincere declaration, emotions she had been carefully guarding, finally surfacing beneath the weight of his honest vulnerability. Rowan, even if I wanted to stay, I'm human. Your world, your responsibilities, they're vastly different from anything I've ever known. How could someone like me possibly belong beside an alpha king? You already belong, Rowan said firmly, reaching for her hands with gentle certainty. You proved that the moment you chose kindness over indifference, the moment you offered help without expecting anything in return. Whatever challenges our different worlds might present, I believe genuinely that we can overcome them together, if you're willing to try. Elena looked into his amber eyes, searching for any hesitation or uncertainty, finding instead only steady, unwavering sincerity. I'm willing to try, she said softly, if you truly believe this can work. I believe it more than I've believed anything, in a very long time, Rowan said, relief and profound joy evident in his expression, as he gently pulled her closer. They stood together on that quiet balcony, overlooking the peaceful kingdom Rowan would soon fight to reclaim fully, both of them acutely aware that tomorrow would bring significant challenges, confrontations that would test not only Rowan's rightful claim to Vermont's throne, but also the strength and resilience of the unlikely bond they had built together across the vast differences separating their two very different worlds. Morning arrived with tense anticipation hanging heavily over Vermont's central stronghold. Word had spread quickly overnight that Rowan had returned, and the great hall filled rapidly with council members, nobles, and curious onlookers, eager to witness whatever confrontation was about to unfold. Edwin arrived last, his expression carefully composed, despite the obvious shock of seeing Rowan alive, and clearly prepared to challenge his growing influence. Your Majesty, Edwin said smoothly, offering a shallow bow that carried little genuine respect beneath its formal gesture. We are all relieved to see you safely returned. The kingdom has worried greatly during your unexplained absence. I'm certain some worried more genuinely than others, Rowan replied evenly, his gaze fixed directly upon Edwin with unwavering intensity. particularly those who believed my absence might prove permanent and beneficial to their own ambitions. A ripple of tension moved through the gathered council members as Rowan's implication became immediately clear. Edwin's composed expression flickered slightly, though he quickly recovered his outward calm. "I'm not certain what you mean to imply, Your Majesty." "Then allow me to clarify," Rowan said, nodding toward Nora, who stepped forward with the carefully compiled evidence, documenting weeks of methodical investigation. "I was ambushed near Vermont's eastern border 3 weeks ago, attacked by members of my own guard, whom I had trusted completely. I have since gathered substantial evidence connecting this betrayal directly to you, Edwin, including testimony confirming your secret funding of additional private guards beyond your officially sanctioned allowance, and further evidence connecting your private security contacts to a subsequent assault against innocent civilians in the human world, an assault intended to eliminate me permanently before I could expose your conspiracy." The Great Hall erupted into stunned murmurs as Nora began presenting the detailed evidence before the assembled council, financial records, witness testimony, and documentation, connecting every piece of Edwin's carefully constructed conspiracy. Edwin's composed facade finally cracked entirely as the weight of undeniable evidence mounted steadily against him, his expression shifting rapidly from calculated confidence toward genuine, desperate panic. "This is fabricated," Edwin insisted, though the conviction in his voice wavered noticeably beneath the mounting evidence displayed before the entire council. "Lies constructed to discredit my legitimate concerns regarding this kingdom's stability during your unexplained absence. The witness testimony alone should prove more than sufficient," Nora said coolly, gesturing toward a nervous, lower-ranking guard, who stepped forward reluctantly, confirming under direct questioning that Edwin had personally ordered the initial ambush against Rowan, promising significant reward and advancement in exchange for loyalty during the planned coup. As the guard's testimony concluded, silence fell heavily across the Great Hall, the weight of undeniable truth finally settling over the assembled council members. Even those who had quietly supported Edwin's growing influence during Rowan's absence now recognized clearly the severity of his betrayal, understanding fully the danger his ambition had posed to Vermont's stability and rightful leadership. Rowan stepped forward, his voice carrying the full weight of his rightful authority, as he addressed Edwin directly, before the entire assembled court. "Edwin, you have betrayed not only my trust, but the trust of every citizen within Vermont who deserves leadership built upon genuine loyalty and integrity, rather than calculated ambition and treachery. Your actions have consequences, and you will face them fully, under Vermont's established laws." As guards moved forward to formally detain Edwin, his desperate protests fading into the growing murmur of council members finally recognizing the truth of his betrayal, Rowan turned back toward where Elena stood quietly near the edge of the Great Hall, watching the dramatic confrontation unfold with a mixture of astonishment and quiet pride for the man she had grown to care for so deeply. The conspiracy had finally been exposed, Rowan's rightful claim to Vermont's throne firmly secured once again. But as the Great Hall slowly began settling from the shock of Edwin's dramatic downfall, Rowan understood clearly that reclaiming his throne represented only the first step in a much larger challenge still awaiting him. The challenge of convincing his own people, his own council, that the human woman standing quietly beside him deserved to remain permanently within Vermont's world, deserved recognition, not merely as his rescuer, but as someone worthy of standing beside him as he continued leading his kingdom forward into a more honest, more compassionate future. In the days following Edwin's exposure and formal removal from Vermont's council, the kingdom slowly began settling back into a sense of stability, Rowan working tirelessly alongside Nora and Daniel to repair the damage caused by weeks of uncertainty and internal conspiracy. Trade negotiations resumed, internal disputes found resolution, and the citizens of Vermont, both common folk and nobility alike, gradually regained confidence in their king's rightful, uncontested leadership. Throughout this period of careful rebuilding, Elena remained close beside Rowan, observing the intricate workings of Vermont's governance with growing fascination and understanding. She spent considerable time with Nora, who patiently explained the kingdom's history, its customs, and the delicate balance of tradition and progress that Rowan worked so carefully to maintain. She also grew close to Daniel, whose genuine warmth and easy friendship helped ease her transition into this entirely unfamiliar world. Not everyone within Vermont welcomed Elena's continued presence with open acceptance, however. Several nobles, accustomed to rigid traditions separating human and Vermont society, expressed quiet disapproval regarding Rowan's evident affection toward a woman they considered fundamentally unsuited to any significant role within the kingdom's future. One afternoon, as Elena walked through Vermont's central gardens, she overheard two noblewomen speaking in hushed, disapproving tones nearby, clearly unaware of her presence, just beyond a row of tall hedges. "It's simply unsuitable," one woman murmured. "A human, however kind-hearted, cannot possibly understand the responsibilities and traditions required of someone standing beside our king. Rowan risks significant instability by allowing this attachment to continue." "Perhaps," the other replied thoughtfully, "though one cannot deny her role in his survival. Still, gratitude and genuine partnership are entirely different matters. I worry for what precedent this sets, should Rowan choose to formalize this relationship beyond simple companionship." Elena retreated quietly, before either woman noticed her presence, their words settling heavily within her chest, despite her efforts to dismiss the sting of their judgment. She found herself questioning, once again, whether she truly belonged within this world of ancient tradition and complex political expectation, regardless of the genuine connection she shared with Rowan. That evening, she mentioned the overheard conversation to Rowan, watching his expression carefully as she recounted the noblewomen's doubts. Rowan listened quietly, his jaw tightening slightly with evident frustration, though he took a moment before responding, clearly choosing his words with careful consideration. "There will always be those within any court who resist change, who cling tightly to rigid tradition, rather than embracing what genuinely benefits our kingdom," he said finally. "But Elena, I have led Vermont long enough to understand that true strength comes not from blind adherence to outdated expectation, but from genuine wisdom, compassion, and courage. Qualities you have demonstrated more consistently than nearly anyone I have encountered throughout my entire life." "That doesn't change how vastly different our worlds remain," Elena said quietly. "I worry, Rowan, that my presence here might genuinely complicate your ability to lead effectively, might create exactly the kind of instability those noblewomen fear." Rowan reached for her hands, holding them gently, as he met her gaze with unwavering sincerity. "Elena, a king who allows the fear of judgment to dictate his most important decisions is not truly leading at all. I want you here, not despite the complications our different backgrounds might present, but because genuine partnership built upon mutual respect and understanding will ultimately strengthen Vermont far more than rigid adherence to outdated tradition ever could." "Are you certain?" Elena asked, still uncertain despite the conviction evident in his tone. "I have never been more certain of anything," Rowan said firmly. "Elena, I intend to formally address the council regarding my wishes for our future together, regardless of whatever resistance certain traditional voices might raise. You have proven your worth not through noble birth or ancient lineage, but through genuine kindness, courage, and unwavering loyalty during the most difficult period of my entire life. Vermont deserves leadership that values these qualities above empty tradition." True to his word, Rowan called a formal council session the following week, addressing the assembled nobles and advisors directly regarding his intentions concerning Elena's continued presence within Vermont's court. He spoke passionately about the values he believed should define genuine leadership, emphasizing that strength without compassion ultimately led only toward the kind of corruption and betrayal that had nearly cost him his life weeks earlier. Some council members remained skeptical, voicing concerns about tradition and precedent, but many others, particularly those who had witnessed firsthand Elena's genuine character during the tense weeks following Edwin's exposure, spoke in her favor, acknowledging that her courage and integrity had proven far more valuable to Vermont's stability than empty adherence to rigid social boundaries. Nora, standing prominently among Rowan's most trusted advisors, offered perhaps the most compelling argument of the entire session. "Our king nearly lost his life to betrayal, born from ambition and calculated self-interest," she said firmly, addressing the assembled council with unwavering conviction. Elena showed him genuine kindness when she had absolutely nothing to gain from such generosity. If Vermont cannot recognize the profound value of such character, regardless of birthright or tradition, then perhaps it is our understanding of true nobility that requires reconsideration, not simply our king's personal choices. Her words resonated deeply throughout the great hall, shifting the tide of opinion decisively in Elena's favor. By the conclusion of the council session, even the most skeptical voices had softened considerably, recognizing that Rowan's judgment, proven repeatedly throughout his reign, deserved trust regarding this deeply personal decision as well. In the months that followed, Elena gradually built a meaningful life within Vermont, learning its customs, contributing her own practical wisdom toward the kingdom's governance, and continuing to demonstrate the same genuine kindness and compassion that had first drawn Rowan toward her that fateful evening on Millhaven Street. She maintained connections with her human life as well, visiting Oliver's bakery periodically, ensuring her old friend understood, in careful, measured terms, that she had found happiness and purpose in an unexpected new chapter of her life. Rowan, for his part, continued leading Vermont with the same balance of strength and compassion that had defined his reign since inheriting the throne from his father, his judgment and wisdom only deepened by the challenges he had overcome and the remarkable woman who had stood beside him through every difficulty. On a clear, beautiful morning, nearly a year after Elena first offered water to a wounded stranger in a forgotten alley, Vermont's great hall filled once again, though this time, the atmosphere carried none of the tension and uncertainty of Rowan's earlier confrontation with Edwin's betrayal. Instead, warmth and genuine celebration filled every corner of the ancient stone chamber, as citizens from every corner of the kingdom gathered to witness a moment of profound significance for Vermont's future. Rowan stood at the center of the great hall, dressed in ceremonial attire befitting his position as Alpha King, his expression carrying quiet joy and unwavering confidence as he watched Elena approach slowly through the gathered crowd, radiant in her own ceremonial dress, carrying herself with the same genuine grace and warmth that had first captured his heart during those difficult weeks of hidden recovery within her small, humble apartment. As Elena reached him, taking his offered hands with quiet certainty, Nora stepped forward to formally address the assembled crowd, her voice carrying clearly throughout the ancient hall. Today, we witness not merely a joining of two individuals, but a testament to the values our kingdom should always strive to embody: genuine kindness, unwavering courage, and the understanding that true strength lies not in rigid tradition alone, but in the wisdom to recognize character and integrity, wherever they might be found. Rowan looked into Elena's eyes, memories of that first fateful night flooding through his mind, the desperate loneliness of his injuries, the unexpected warmth of her simple offer of water and shelter, and the remarkable journey that had unfolded from that single, genuine act of kindness. "You saved my life that night," he said softly, his voice carrying deep emotion, despite the formal setting surrounding them. "Not merely through the water and shelter you offered, but through the genuine humanity you showed a broken stranger, who had every reason to expect indifference instead. You gave me a life far richer and more meaningful than I ever imagined possible," Elena replied, her own voice thick with emotion as she looked upon the man who had transformed from a mysterious, wounded stranger into the center of her entire world. "I would choose that night again, every single time, regardless of any danger or difficulty that followed." As their ceremony concluded amid joyous celebration throughout Vermont's great hall, the story of the humble woman who had offered water to a beggar, never knowing he was the Alpha King, became legend throughout the hidden kingdom. A powerful reminder passed down through generations that genuine kindness, however small it might initially appear, possessed the profound power to reshape destinies, heal ancient betrayals, and unite two entirely different worlds through nothing more than the simple, courageous choice to help a stranger in need. Elena Marsh, once a humble bakery worker from an ordinary human street, became Vermont's queen, not through calculated ambition or noble birthright, but through the simple, unwavering strength of her own compassionate heart, ruling wisely and generously alongside the Alpha King she had saved, ensuring that Vermont's future would always remember the profound importance of kindness, courage, and the willingness to help even the most broken and forgotten souls who crossed one's path, regardless of how little reward such kindness might initially seem to offer.